Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, episode 54. Tonight we welcome back friend of the show and returning guest, Hagerstown City Councilman Sean Flaherty. We dive into the immigration, the 287G program, and how working with ICE has lowered crime in both Frederick and Washington counties, despite the push from woke politicians to shut it down. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have our very special guest, our returning guest. Sean, I believe you are the #1 returning guest on Mid-Maryland Votes. Thank you for joining us, Sean Flaherty.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Sean, you are a city councilman for Hagerstown, and you have been in that position for many years. We appreciate your valuable input on the politics and the going-ons in the Hagerstown area. We just appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me back. And I've only been elected. It will be a year this month that I was sworn in. So
you are a very busy one-year councilman. You're a rookie still, but you're very busy. I love that about you. I was tracking you in Radio Free Hub City, and it seems like you went to a bunch of Veterans Day events.
We have all the memorials in town here. We have like the Korean Memorial. It's right by my house. And even they have a Korean Memorial event there once a year. And I think Larry Hogan's wife attends that regularly.
Wow.
She even attended last year when he wasn't governor anymore. So,
well, as two veterans, we appreciate you honoring the veterans by going out there. I couldn't help but notice that some of your fellow council members were not present at some of these Memorial Day events. I'm not sure why that was, but maybe you can explain it to us.
No, I mean, they got invited just like everybody else. And, you know,
I saw you and the mayor.
And I appreciate
Mayor McIntyre was there. You were there. I didn't see a lot of the other councilmen.
Right.
Council persons, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they kind of go to wherever they feel like is best for them. And I guess Veteran Day wasn't it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I do appreciate y'all's service. And, you know, I served in the Army National Guard for 7 years. I was enlisted, then became an officer in South Carolina. So
here's free advice to any of you local politicians who are part of our audience. Veterans, we notice who shows up for these things. Okay. And that's how we usually vote, just to help you out.
And one of the other things with these events is that they don't exist for no reason. These events serve to pass on the knowledge and the culture that has preserved America for all of these centuries. And so really, I mean, politicians, certainly, of course, it's the policies and the laws are all very, very important, but also politicians serve the role of maintaining and passing on the culture to the next generation.
Yes. And by attending, that culture is ratified.
Yes.
You know, you ratify the culture if you attend these events. That's your job. That's your job. That's what you that's what you got elected for, right?
Well, and veterans make a big part of our community. They come home, you know, they work our factories, they, you know, fight our streets with crime. A lot of them are police officers and, you know, they fight our wars. And, you know, the least we can do as a community is recognize them for their contributions of the United States and locally what they're doing here. But, you know, and I try to, when I get time to go visit a new business that's opened or, you know, go have coffee there. And, you know, I like Bailey's a lot on Washington Street. I hang out there a lot. I bring my laptop and, you know, I'll talk to the owner and say, hey, what's going on? What issues do you have? And, you know, parking's a big thing for a lot of business owners. You know, the city has kind of failed. All the parking meters got broken into, which is funny because the last administration said, oh, well, we don't have a crime problem. Everything's wonderful.
Yeah. Hold up, Sean, let's go back. You're telling me the administration for Hagerstown on a previous regime said that Hagerstown doesn't have a crime problem.
You know, it's like
that's
really
absolutely ridiculous. I mean, look, I don't care what party you come from, Democrat, Republican, Independent, which you know, ridiculous to deny the facts of the matter. And Hagerstown has a crime issue. We all know this. You just have to walk downtown and you'll see it with your own bare eyes.
And this is really what so many constituents, voters, are complaining about all across the country as well as locally when they say that politicians aren't dealing with the issues that are affecting their lives, their children's lives, is basically a denial of what is obviously right in front of all of our faces. And it really is shocking. And I got to give Sean credit as being one of those politicians that doesn't do that. He will say, here are the ugly truths, and here are the positives, and then he'll discuss what to do, but from that starting point.
Breaking headline: President is Bill Ferguson of the Senate. They want to pass legislation in Annapolis where they don't want to allow counties to participate in the 287G program with ICE, which Washington County participates in, Frederick County and, Sheriff Jenkins have. And that really hurts the safety of our residents. Again, we participate in that, and now they don't want anybody to participate in that. And even our comptroller did a whole statement today saying, oh, they make all Maryland communities unsafe. Well, they're getting this unsafe people off the street. Thank God for them.
Let's talk about the 287G program, because many Americans, and especially people in our region, they don't understand what this program actually does and what it doesn't do, right? So people hear 287G, which is an agreement between local law enforcement to cooperate with ICE, so that if they do detain a person for a major crime, by the way, not for minor offenses, but for a major crime, they will validate their immigration status. If there is a problem with it, they will notify ICE. So if there's a detainer on them, if there's a further crime, it helps the law enforcement community to communicate with each other and know what they have. So the 287G program has been highly effective for both Washington County and Frederick County. Now, conversely, Frederick City does not participate in the 287G program, and shockingly, their crime is much, much higher than in the Frederick County area.
Well, they let illegals vote too in local Frederick elections, and the mayor won 60% of the vote there. It's bad policy after bad policy, but folks get what they vote for too. And I spoke with the police chief here, and they don't really arrest a lot of folks from that program here because a lot of them don't come here. They stay in Frederick or Montgomery, mostly Montgomery too.
Yeah, we had Sheriff Jenkins on. He stated during that interview that one of the main reasons why Frederick County has such a low crime rate in comparison to its surrounding counties is that he was the first sheriff in the nation who, under the 287G program, did work with ICE. And as a result, they have preemptively taken a number of criminals off the street. And that's really what it is. I mean, a lot of people obviously refer to it as being racist or what have you. I don't see anything racist about it. It is simply, doing what law enforcement does for every single group.
And if you arrest somebody or detain somebody, you always gather as much information about that person as possible. I mean, you find out their date of birth, their sex, their gender, their eye color, their hair color, of certainly their citizenship, or whether they're here in the country legally, should be an actual data. And one thing that Sheriff Jenkins pointed out on our show, our previous podcast, which our listeners can look up, is that ICE activity in Frederick County is almost non-existent because they don't need to be. So the community is actually safer. So the Latino community, the immigrant community, they're safer because ICE isn't rolling around picking up people. They don't have to. They just wait for Frederick County to call them if they get a detainer on a criminal, a violent criminal. They're not just picking up people for trespassing or DUIs or whatever else.
They're not going after housekeepers or folks that are like you said, it has to be a felony. It has to be an actual, they're breaking the law, which is what we want, are the criminals removed from our country, especially if they don't belong here legally,
And citizens need to be aware of that fact. If the person is undocumented, they're an undocumented immigrant, and they're committing crimes, why are we trying to protect them? If they're committing crimes, they literally are victimizing our society when they shouldn't even be here. So I can tell you, Sheriff Jenkins is in the battle right now because the executive Fitzwater, she is trying to eliminate cooperation with ICE and has actually put out a statement that she wants to dissolve any agreements countywide with ICE. Luckily, in Frederick County, we elect our sheriff. They're not appointed. So he's an elected sheriff. He also happens to be a Republican, and he doesn't have to listen to anybody tell him to get off the 287G program.
Yeah, Sheriff Bryan does the same here. He's elected. So he's had great leadership in doing that. And I even like his opponent, Chucky Johnson, they were both in agreement, and I kind of talked to both of them, so I like them a lot. So
yeah, we've had Chucky on the program as well, and he stated his support for the 287G program as well.
And Sean, so in Washington County, Sheriff Brian Albert, you're saying that he does participate in the 287G program?
Yes, from what I know. So,
and in Hagerstown, with Chief Kiefer is the chief of the Hagerstown Police Department. Do they participate in the 287G program?
What I know, they have, but they haven't arrested anybody because I talked to the chief the other week, this past week, and he said no, they haven't arrested anybody under that or anything. And and they're pretty cooperative with everything. And and I really like Sheriff Brian Albert's, his leadership on that. Because at the end of the day, folks want law and order. They want the laws to be enforced. And, we already have enough issues with, people that are born here. We don't need to have folks that are not from here to move into our communities and start getting more trouble.
No. So just for the viewers who aren't from the Hagerstown area, you talked about several names there, but let's qualify one. We have a chief of police for Hagerstown City, and his name is
Chief Kiefer.
And then we have the head sheriff, the sheriff who's in charge of the county-wide police department, and his name is
Brian Albert.
Right. So these two people run different departments. Both apparently do cooperate with the 287G program, although I've heard Hagerstown will not call.
And one of the other sides of the debate about the 287G program is not that it isn't effective in removing a criminal element from our society, but what it is that there are, so in my family, the largest contingent of my family actually is Hispanic. And one of the side effects of the 287G program and programs like it that have existed, for decades, is that it opens up the Hispanic community to be victimized by certain groups who believe that they will not call the police if a criminal activity, if they are robbed, if a criminal activity is committed against them. And so what ends up happening is that it creates a mentality, a fear, and an injustice within the Hispanic community. Does that mean that we should not be actively removing a aspect of the criminal element that we do have the ability to remove?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. I think criminal activity needs to be removed, and I mean, all of us deserve, and it's sad that they don't feel like they can report that, or and I'm sure there's things that do happen there, because I do have my cousin, they live in New Mexico, and they've told me they've had, been wrongly profiled, or while they're Hispanic too. And my aunt, she's Ethiopian. She lives in Montgomery County with my uncle. They live in Rockville, but she came over the right way, and she opens a hair salon in DC, and she's a millionaire. She's got more money than I do. So, I mean, those are the types of folks we want to attract for a community that are going to make them better. And they had the whole Free Melissa home here, and I'm glad that from what I heard, she was released and things like that. I don't know the whole details of her story and things like that, but that was a big issue locally about what happened to her.
And that's an interesting case right there where you mentioned, and her family has been fairly open about her case because there was a movement within the community to get her back home. And it really does speak a lot to how this program really operates.
Can you summarize the case for us?
Yes. So what ended up happening is that this lady who was an illegal immigrant from Vietnam, as a child, she came to America with her family. When she was 18 years old, she robbed a doctor's office that she worked at. And it was of a significant sum of money, is my understanding. Now, and so she was guilty. And at that time, though, Vietnam was not accepting individuals back. And so the deal that was made is, look, we're not going to just keep you in jail for stealing this money, but obviously that you did do something clearly wrong, and there needs to be consequences. And what the consequences were is that once a year she had to go to the Immigration and Naturalization Services and check in. That was at least 20 years ago, I believe. At this point, she became a business owner, married, children. Her children, I believe, are model students in Washington County public schools. And of course, she employs individuals. I mean, truly, if you want to talk about turning your life around, she's 180 degrees, great example. She ended up going to her annual check-in at the office, the Immigration Naturalization Services office, and ICE was there and picked her up. And then she just went from various facility to various facility around the country in the process of being deported. Now, what's very interesting is you never hear about this, but it appears that what happened is that there is some degree of due process. Even though illegal immigrants do not have the due process that citizens have, there must be some type of a justice system within this process. She went before a judge. The judge determined that no, you are not a criminal. You actually are a very productive member of society. Sent her home to her family. She is back. So it actually was a very, very interesting situation that I think speaks a lot about the amount of misinformation that clearly is out there, along with the fears that are legitimate, even if they are legitimately inflated. There still is a source for the fears, and I think it's a very interesting case that brings a lot of that into perspective.
I think one of the problems we have is our media, which is liberal biased, is definitely playing up the fears or playing to the fears of the immigrant communities, because clearly, the system it does have flaws. Obviously, there's going to be mistakes made by people, but by and large, the ICE agents are arresting criminal elements. They're not taking people off the street and various things. They're serving warrants. They are going after particular individuals in that raid, in that sweep. If they happen to run into people who are undocumented, they will bring them in for verification. And as you said, there is some amount of due process.
Well, I also don't blame a lot of the immigrants coming here illegally. I blame our government and our system for letting them here in the first place. We didn't secure a border. We made it easy for them to come over. I mean, they're going to do everything they can to have a better life and come over here. And I think a lot of them do. I think there's a criminal element that will seep into that and ruin it for everybody else. But I ultimately blame our own government. It's been both parties' fault that they haven't secured the border. And as you know, right now, the Trump administration is going after a lot of the cartels because the drug issue is horrible. Opioid, fentanyl, it's destroying our communities like Hagerstown. And I applaud the president for doing that. But, I really blame our own system for failing, immigrants legally and that's really why a lot of them came illegally and things like that. And we've made it easy for them and offer benefits and things there that sometimes we don't even offer our own people. Right now, as you can see, the whole shutdown with the government, a lot of it was over, healthcare subsidies. And a lot of it was going to illegal aliens, especially here in Maryland, which the Moore administration wanted to have. They would let 45 million Americans go hungry off SNAP just to let illegals have free healthcare. And it's wrong. I want to help folks in our own country that are born here. I don't think the United States can afford to be everything to everybody, and that's why we're trillions of dollars in debt from both parties. And honestly, our own government has failed, our own citizens. And that's really the sad part of it.
You bring up an interesting point. Advocates for the subsidies, which are for part of Obamacare, right? So what we found out is what they promised us. This is that famous Nancy Pelosi said, we got to pass the bill in order to find out what's in the bill. Remember that? That's what she said. And we found out that it's an unsustainable system that they guaranteed us and promised us that it would pay for itself, right? Well, it doesn't. And these subsidies that they're talking about are millions of dollars we have to pump back into the system to make this foolproof system they guaranteed us 20 years ago that it was going to work this time. And it doesn't. And the truth is that advocates for the immigrant community says, well, they don't qualify for Medicaid and Medicare anyway, so these subsidies really don't affect them. We all know that's a load of bull because these subsidies go directly into the hospitals and emergency rooms, which are the first primary source of treatment for people who are here illegally.
And one of the things that I think has gone completely unreported on, but when you talk to individuals who work in nursing homes, over the years, one of the things they describe is that there's a continuous lessening of services under Medicare, which of course is the health insurance for retirees in America that we've had for many decades now. And it seems like there is an uncanny correlation between when reports of these cuts in services to Medicare that's occurring in these nursing homes correlates to when there's a dramatic increase in Medicaid spending. And it does seem to be highly correlated to an increase in the illegal alien community. Hispanic population, to a very large extent, going all the way back to the 80s, has really almost been invited to come to America. And I don't think that was a bad thing. I mean, I consider it the third best thing to ever happen to my life, you know? I mean, so it's not that it's entirely bad, but what
I think
happens
we're all for immigration as long as it's mostly legal, you know?
well, exactly. And for whatever reason, the determination was made that when it comes to immigration from Hispanics across the southern border, it was okay to have a certain amount of illegal immigration. But once that precedent was set, right, just like everything else, whether good or bad, it has a tendency to grow and get unbalanced. And it really took a turn for the worse, I would actually say, in 2012. When the determination was made to essentially just open up the borders. And basically, we overloaded the system. If you talk to the public schools, there are so many non-English speaking students, they can't handle it. Like, it's not an issue of what's compassionate or not compassionate. It's an issue of practicality. Practically can't handle it. That's occurring to the healthcare system as well. You know, how do you deal with it compassionately? Sure, but it has to be dealt with.
You know, student at Rockville High that was illegal alien raped one of the students there, you know, right. And then I've been very disappointed in our own congressional delegation, you know, and I told folks on my council page, you're worried about your SNAP benefits in the government shutdown. Well, you might want to contact Senators Van Hollen and Alsterbrooks because they voted against the CR, you know, so they're voting against their own workers, and a lot of government workers live in Maryland, you know, and they're biting the hand that feeds them, and they're picking fights with the Trump administration left and right, which isn't very smart. You know, our own congresswoman went on the far left to go do that. And I even heard that Congressman David Jones looking to primary her. So that's going to be interesting if that happens next year. But, you know, if anything, our own state delegation has failed Marylanders. You know, we are our biggest recipient of federal aids, and you're going to, you know, piss off the Trump administration. You're not making things better for the residents here. And, you know, we have an immigration problem here. We need to cooperate with ICE, and we just need common sense. And a lot of folks on the federal level and state level they don't have it.
Common sense politics. That's the problem. We you know, and it goes on both sides, you know. I mean, you know, I'm more of a centrist. I believe there should be a pathway to citizenship for people. You mentioned Melissa. Pathway to citizenship. It's clear that she should have a pathway to citizenship. And there are hardworking people who've come to the country for whatever reason, illegally, whatever we want to call them. We should offer a pathway to citizenship, not just throw them all out of the country.
And a better way, too. And we need to attract, you know, folks that can build a business here, get hired from people. And, you know, there are folks from a lot of Central and South America that don't have those skills, and they're dumping a whole lot of folks that are dependent on our system. When we need folks who are going to come here who are not dependent and they're self-sufficient, you know?
Correct. And that's what we need. We need people to come in, join the labor force, have the same goals as all other Americans, which is the opportunity, not Uncle Sam giving them, you know, SNAP and Section 8 and, you know, all the other benefits, but actually an opportunity to make the most of your life. I have multiple immigrants that I work with, and all of them came to the country legally, and all of them are hardcore against illegal immigration.
And the level of irresponsibility or insanity, whatever word you want to use, was when kind of reached a high point for me when about 2 or 3 years ago, the president of Venezuela was bragging on his national TV about how he emptied out the jail cells and sent them to America. And
we're at the point now where I think most Americans admit that the open border was a mistake. Even I've got Democratic friends who are definitely finally coming around to the fact that the open borders was a huge mistake. It's not whether that was a mistake. That's the past. It's how we deal with it now, right? And many of them feel like the approach of the Trump presidency is inhumane and does not offer enough opportunity for good, hardworking immigrants, whether they be legal or illegal, to, you know, have a pathway to citizenship. What do you guys' response to that?
I mean, I think the Trump administration is just enforcing the laws we already have in the books. They're not reinventing the wheel. And from what I know, the majority of folks they're removing are the real criminals. They're not the housekeepers and, going up to Home Depot, and I also saw recently a Montgomery County council member try to start a fight with ICE, and she was pushed aside and they almost tried to arrest her. And then she complained about that. It's like, well, that's federal law. You can't interfere yourself with that. And, they don't.
Oh, it's become very hip on the left to interfere with ICE and even assault them.
And, look, they're attacking me. You're the one interjecting yourself in that investigation, and the consequences are on you. What happens to you? I don't feel sorry.
I just read some statistics. I think it was yesterday that over 150 ICE officers have been seriously assaulted since the start of the push.
When the system gets overloaded the way that it has been since that 2012 period and onwards, I don't know that it's going to be that it's functionally able to be smooth when you're dealing with something that's this troubled. So what happens is you almost have to do the best you can at first. And then when you catch the Melissas of the world, then you have as fair of a process as you can set up that in her case did send her back home, right? Did send her back to Washington County. And then, of course, there's the issue of the misinformation. So one example that I can talk about is that, I received a text from a family member showing a video of ICE, which at first appears to be just brutally dragging a Hispanic woman out of her vehicle, right? But then when you look at it a little bit, what you realize is, wait a second, there's a guy dressed in Antifa gear with camera equipment. Nobody just randomly stands around in Antifa gear with camera equipment in 2025. That wouldn't even happen before cell phones. So you also have to try to deal with the vast amount of misinformation that's purposefully being put out there.
Yeah, and that purpose is obviously by the liberal media. And the liberal media and other organizations are absolutely trying to create a narrative that ICE is brutal and it's indiscriminate and it's just sweeping people up, like Sean said, the housekeepers and the average working immigrants, they're just sweeping them up and throwing them in the trash. And that's completely not the truth. Exactly. The truth is that ICE is doing a very good job in a very hostile environment. Before you can get into the corners, you got to sweep the big floor, right? So you got to make that big sweep, get the floor clean, and then you can get into the corners. So, I absolutely believe in a pathway to citizenship, but I also support 100% what ICE is having to go through and what they're doing right now. But our liberal media, they are definitely inciting violence, and so are by the way, the far left politicians are doing the same thing. Speaking about
Senator Van Hollen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He did the whole ICE thing with the MS-13 gang member, and it's like he cared more about an illegal MS-13 gang member than his own law-abiding constituents. It was kind of embarrassing for him.
Didn't he do that and have a margarita all at the same time?
Yeah, he did. And actually, it was it was Secretary Rubio that went after him in the committee hearing. If you watch that video, and he told him, "Why don't you go have another margarita with the terrorist?" So, and that triggered Van Hollen to act crazy. But
what Van Hollen triggered? That almost never happens.
Well, him and Jamie Raskin, they're both they care more about illegals than their own law-abiding constituents, and that's kind of where the Democratic Party's at. They elected Mandani. They want free everything. They're going the socialist route. And I think Chuck Schumer's days as Senate Majority Leader are coming to an end because she'll primary him. And, the Democrats are starting to retire. Nancy Pelosi, the old guard, said they're going to replace by the radical far left. And that's what we're seeing now.
And the crazy thing is that, being a New Yorker, I have some familiarity with the career of Chuck Schumer, and he is generally speaking regarded as a very intelligent, practical, moderate, right? If you go back early enough in his career, but not anymore. And it seems to me that it is really an illustration of how the radicalization in politics has swept even people who, in their heart of hearts, built their career off of being a very practical moderate, have had to become radical in their own view in order to remain relevant and electable.
Well, think about it. You're a moderate Democrat, which I was, by the way. I was a lifelong Democrat. I was a moderate. My party didn't. I didn't leave my party. My party left me. So what choices do you have when you're a moderate, common sense Democrat, and the far left is taking over your party. They've pulled you in a direction of progressivism, which you don't really fully support. But what are you going to do? Your choices are: you run as an independent, you become a Republican, or you buy into the far left rhetoric, which seems to be all these old guards in the Democrats. They folded like a card table, and now they're all pandering. I mean, does anybody really believe that Mondami is going to have any success with his programs in New York? Yes, those young liberal went out and voted for him, who thought everything's going to be free now. We're going to get free buses. We're going to get, and the beautiful thing was, the day he was elected, the governor of New York said, that ain't going to happen. I'm a Democrat and I'm a liberal, but what you're talking about with free buses ain't going to happen.
When you have like the, and I mean, you're kind of screwed when your choice is, Andrew Cuomo, who's disgraced, not a great option. And then you got a communist running.
If you look at the people who voted for Mondami, the working class New Yorkers did not vote for him.
Cuomo yet.
It was the more liberal, higher income folks who voted for him.
Oh, yeah, it's the arts.
The people who went to college.
Brooklyn,
the people who went to college and got indoctrinated.
Yeah. Brooklyn was his highest percentage points, and they have $4,000 a month apartments. They shop at Whole Foods, have doggy daycares. And they're very woke, and they think everybody else is beneath them, just like most of the folks that live in the District of Columbia. They're no different. So,
and Sean, there is a woke element. Tell me if you disagree with that, but there's a woke element of politics in Hagerstown and on our city council. Obviously, you make no bones about it. You disagree with that brand of politics. How do you deal with it?
Well, I mean,
personally?
we've had a lady, Taj Smith. She's running for county commissioner. She's been pushing 16-year-olds to vote, like other jurisdictions in Maryland, which is funny. Liberal Rockville voted it down. They also voted against illegals voting in municipal elections in Rockville. So it's funny. Frederick City is further to the left than Rockville, Maryland. And, they're pushing social agenda issues. They want to bring up rent control. That's going to be coming up soon in the city council. And I do offer a conversation about what we can do to make things more affordable for folks, but I don't support rent control. I support the free market, and a lot of it's supply and demand. We haven't built enough housing, and we're going to become like California, where a fixer-upper is $800,000 because you have a huge demand and there's no supply. And that's happening in our area, but it's happening nationwide too. It's not just, unique to Hagerstown, but they really want to go into social justice issues, but they really neglect the bread and butter and public safety and common sense issues that folks really care about. Nobody I've talked to in town wants illegals or 16-year-olds to vote. They're like, what are you going to do to make my street safe where I don't see drug deals on my corner? What are you going to do to, have more lighting and cameras? Like, what are you going to do to fix the needles that are around here all the time? And a lot of it's insane policies from Annapolis. The police can't arrest a lot of them. And the health department hands out free needles like candy. So it's like Baltimore. You continuously get the same folks you keep electing. You're going to get the same results, and it's insanity at its worst. And that's happening a lot in Maryland, not just Hagerstown. And it's not about the issues that people care about. And that's how I won. Is I didn't talk about Trump or Harris. I didn't talk about national stuff. I talked about the local stuff people cared about. Because at the end of the day, and they don't give a crap about that. What are you going to do? Fix their light, their potholes, and the crimes. And we got to get back to the basics, and that's on the local level before the state and federal can get some common sense.
That is what really gets taken away from politics when we focus on partisan issues or identity politics or and any of the things that we're talking about coming out of Annapolis in the last few days regarding the 287G program. But the fact is that practical decision making is actually how quality of life increases and is maintained in any community. And
and more folks are going to leave this state. They want to continuously tax people like Mondani, and they're just going to flee. And so,
there's no doubt Marylanders are leaving Maryland in droves. They're going across the line into West Virginia. I'd say probably half the people that I work with now in Western Maryland, in Hagerstown area, half of them at least live in Pennsylvania or West Virginia.
I've even thought about that too. In the comptroller's report that just came out saying they're fleeing, but yet the comptroller, along with the current administration in Annapolis, keeps supporting policies that are making them flee, and they don't seem to double think that. I do feel for the folks that want to do that, because I feel like Western Maryland, our voice is always drowned out by what's happening in PG, Baltimore, and Montgomery. you know,
And that will get much, much worse if they're able to redistrict the map.
Well, and that's the issue is that in Maryland, over a third of Maryland residents are Republican. And yet, out of the 8 Congress men and women in Maryland, only one is a Republican, and they want to redistrict that last one away so that every representative is Democrat, when over a third of Marylanders are actually Republican. I mean, so when you talk about drowning out the voice of the people, not being diverse, that this is the ultimate example of it.
And Governor Hogan did a great job of appointing conservative judges to the Maryland Supreme Court that struck that down and said, you can't do this, and I do think Bill Ferguson is a little worried that if Dems go ahead with this redistricting commission, it could be thrown in court, and it actually might help Republicans and make it more fair.
The Democrats are playing into the hands of the conservatives, because what they're going to do is they are going to try to gerrymander even more, even though Maryland is the #1 gerrymandered state in the country.
Yeah.
Okay. They're going to try to gerrymander more. It is going to get kicked up to the Supreme Court, and they're going to get crushed. But look, as a centrist, as a moderate, as a guy in the middle, I can also see this. Okay. Both Republicans and Democrats ostracize and villainize any politician that's willing to try to cross the aisle and work with the other side. We have to end that. We're not rhinos or turncoats or whatever else the Democrats or Republicans would call. We have to find a way to work in the middle.
On the local level, you have to be more bipartisan, really. I mean,
you have to. Yeah. Local politics, potholes and trash pickup do not have a political party, okay? Exactly. So we find common ground there, and that's a beautiful thing. Hogan was willing to work across the aisle. He was called a rhino for it. We had Ron Bowers on here a couple weeks ago, right? Mm-hmm. He talked about how he was villainized because he would talk to any Republican he could to try to form plans together. It's effective government. What's not effective is when the factions fight against each other to the point where the common citizens get hurt.
But they actually are harmful. Like it's now becoming a regular thing. I mean, just look at the budget that was announced on the state level just earlier this week. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of deficits that is going to cause so many cuts to essential budget services, such as disabled individuals, such as to replacing ambulances. These are all budget cuts that started last year that are only going to get worse this year. And clearly it is because of partisanship. There's nothing practical about it. Oh, I think this was a phenomenal conversation, and the things that were discussed are highly relevant to what's going to affect our lives today and ongoing.
And I think our viewers need to understand, don't be a Democrat, don't be a Republican, don't be an independent. Be a concerned citizen that actually does your homework,
yes,
and then vote for the person who's right for the job, regardless what they have an R or a D or an I at the end of their name.
As far as I'm concerned, the only political party should be a political party called Common Sense.
All right, guys. Thanks for being here with us, Sean Flaherty of the Hagerstown City Council. Thank you for joining us again. We always enjoy having you on the show. It's always a stimulating conversation. To our viewers, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did enjoy the show, please like and share it with your friends. Or if you didn't like it, share it with your enemies. We don't discriminate. Thanks for being with us on Mid-Maryland Votes. This has been Mark Flynn and my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And thank you to Sean Flaherty. We'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland.
That was returning guest and friend of the show, Councilman Sean Flaherty. A real unfiltered look at immigration, enforcement, and what's at stake for Maryland's futures. Conversations like this matter, and this is where we have them on Mid-Maryland Votes. Like, follow, and share for more content like this. Find us on Facebook and YouTube, and leave a comment. Let us know how we're doing.